The math was not mathing. I sat at my kitchen table, which was actually a folding card table I'd salvaged from a dumpster in 3 parts, and stared at the numbers on my laptop screen. Rent was $800. My freelance indexing check for the latest technical manual on industrial HVAC systems was $412. My bank account was currently sitting at $23.47. If I ate nothing but generic brand oatmeal for the next 11 days and didn't breathe too much oxygen, I might survive. The radiator in my tiny studio apartment made a sound like a dying walrus, a rhythmic clanking that usually I could ignore. But today, it felt like a countdown. My life was a series of small, polite disasters stacked on top of each other, like a very depressing game of Tetris. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the grit of 16 hours of staring at spreadsheets. My hair smelled like the bakery downstairs, yeast and burnt sugar, which was the only perk of living in a building that was 60% mold. I reached for my phone, my fingers hovering over the cracked screen. I needed to vent to my sister, Sophie. She was the only person who didn't judge me for the fact that I was 26 and still couldn't afford a toaster that didn't spark when I plugged it in. But then, there was the other thing, the thing that was currently sitting in a crumpled white bag on my counter. The medical result. I'd gone to a free clinic 3 days ago because of a weird persistent fatigue, and they'd called me back with a result that made the room go sideways. It wasn't a pregnancy test, thank God, considering my romantic life was a barren wasteland. But it was a blood marker that suggested something expensive, something chronic, something that required a specialist I couldn't afford. I was terrified. I was so terrified that my hands were shaking as I picked up the phone to record a voice memo. I couldn't even type the words. I needed to hear myself say them. I hit record. "Sophie, I'm falling apart," I whispered into the microphone. My voice sounded small, like it belonged to a child instead of a grown woman. The test came back. It's positive for that autoimmune marker, the one Mom had. I don't have insurance, Soph. I don't have anything. I'm sitting here looking at $20 and I don't know how I'm going to pay for the meds, let alone the rent. I'm scared. I think I'm actually genuinely breaking. I hit stop. I didn't look. I just hit the share icon, tapped the contact at the top of my recent list, or so I thought, and hit send. I dropped the phone on the table and put my head in my hands. I stayed like that for 5 minutes, listening to the radiator and the sound of a car alarm 3 blocks away. When I finally picked the phone back up to see if Sophie had replied, my heart didn't just drop. It did a full-speed swan dive into the concrete. The message hadn't gone to Sophie. Sophie's number ended in 44. The number I had sent it to ended in 45. A number I didn't recognize. A number that wasn't in my contacts. I stared at the screen. The little blue bubble was there. Delivered. Read. Oh no. No. This is not happening. I am currently experiencing a hallucination brought on by cheap oatmeal and despair. I checked the number again. It was a local area code, but the sequence was elegant, if a phone number could be elegant. A lot of zeros. I scrambled to type a follow-up. "I am so incredibly sorry," I typed, my thumbs tripping over each other. That was a wrong number. "Please delete it. It was private. I am so sorry." I waited. 1 minute, 2, 3. My heart was a drum in my ears. Then, the 3 dots appeared. My breath hitched. This is fine. It's probably just some guy named Dave who will say, "No worries," and that'll be it. The text arrived. It was not from Dave. It was 4 words. "Who is this, Ilara?" I froze. My blood turned to slush. How did they know my name? I hadn't said my name in the voice memo. I looked at my phone settings. My outgoing caller ID was set to my full name, Ilara Vance. I felt a cold sweat break out across my neck. I didn't answer. I did the only logical thing a person in a state of total psychological collapse does. I blocked the number. I tapped the contact, scrolled down, and hit block this caller with a satisfying thud of my thumb. There. Gone. Deleted. The universe had played a cruel joke, and I had simply opted out of the punchline. I went to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. The mirror showed a woman with dark circles under her eyes and a faint smear of flour on her cheek. "You are fine," I told my reflection. "You are a ghost. You don't exist." Nobody cares about a random voice memo from a broke girl in a studio apartment. I went back to my HVAC manual. I spent the next 4 hours indexing terms like refrigerant recovery and thermal expansion valves. I convinced myself I was safe. It was 11 o'clock at night when the first black SUV pulled up to the curb outside the bakery. I only noticed it because the engine was so quiet, it was loud. Most cars on this street sounded like they were held together by duct tape and prayers, but this thing hummed with the sound of pure, unadulterated wealth. I looked out my window, pulling back the thin, yellowed curtain. A woman stepped out of the back seat. Even from the third floor, she looked like she was made of different materials than the rest of the world. She was tall, wearing a charcoal gray wool coat that probably cost more than my entire education. Her hair was a sharp, dark bob that caught the street lamp light like silk. She didn't look up. She just walked straight into the bakery entrance, which led to the apartments upstairs. My heart stopped. No, there is no way. It's a coincidence. Maybe she's a very wealthy person who really likes day-old croissants. Then, the knocking started. It wasn't the frantic pounding of a neighbor or the heavy thud of a landlord. It was 3 precise, rhythmic raps on my door. I stood in the middle of my room, clutching a highlighter like a weapon. "Who is it?" I called out. My voice was an octave higher than usual. "Open the door, Alara," a voice replied. It was low, smooth, and carried the kind of authority that made you want to apologize for being born. It sounded like cedar and dark coffee. It sounded like the voice memo had found its target. I walked to the door, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. I peeked through the peephole. It was her, the woman from the SUV. Up close, she was even more terrifying. Her eyes were a piercing, crystalline blue, and her expression was as cold as the glass in a high-rise office. I opened the door 3 inches, keeping the chain on. "Can I help you?" I asked. The woman didn't move. She didn't even blink. "You blocked my number," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact that carried a heavy weight of disapproval. "I didn't know who you were," I stammered. "I still don't. You're the woman who sent a 3-minute recording of her medical history and financial ruin to my personal line," she said. She reached into her coat and pulled out a phone. "My name is Juliana Vane. I suggest you open the door before my security detail decides this hallway is a safety hazard." Juliana Vane. The name hit me like a physical blow. Juliana Vane was the CEO of Vane Tech. She was on the cover of Forbes. She was the woman who had single-handedly revolutionized cloud computing and then bought half of the real estate in the city just because she was bored. And I had sent her a voice memo of me crying about my lack of insurance. I unhooked the chain. My hands were shaking so hard, I almost dropped the latch. I opened the door. Juliana Vane stepped into my apartment. She looked around the 12 by 12 space with an expression I couldn't quite read. It wasn't disgust. It was more like she was observing a strange, tiny ecosystem she hadn't realized existed. Her eyes landed on my card table, my laptop, and the bag from the clinic. "You have a positive marker for lupus," she said, turning back to me. Her voice was softer now, but no less intense. "The test was preliminary. You need a specialist, a biopsy, and you're worried about $800 in rent. I felt a hot flush of shame creep up my neck. Why are you here? I asked, my voice cracking. Why do you care? You're a billionaire. People probably send you the wrong things all the time. Not like this, she said. She stepped closer. She was much taller than me, and she smelled like something expensive and unreachable, sandalwood and cold rain. Most people want something from me, Alara. They want an investment, a job, a scandal. You sent me a confession of your own mortality, and then you blocked me. It was inefficient. I don't know what to say, I whispered. I'm sorry. I already said that. I don't want anything from you. I'm just going to figure it out. Juliana's lip curled slightly, but it wasn't a sneer. It was almost a smile, though a very dangerous one. You're going to figure it out with $23 and a freelance gig indexing HVAC manuals? I don't think so. She turned and walked back toward the door, then paused. Pack a bag. I stared at her. Excuse me? You're coming with me, she said. My physician will see you tomorrow morning at 8. My driver is waiting. But I have a job. I have a life, I protested, even though the life in question currently involved a dying walrus radiator and a pile of generic oatmeal. Your life, as it currently stands, is a series of failures in risk management, Juliana said, her blue eyes locking onto mine. I am taking over the management. You have 10 minutes. If you aren't downstairs by then, I'll have my men come up and pack for you. And trust me, they have very poor taste in stationery. She walked out, leaving the door hanging open. I stood there for a full minute, just breathing. This was insane. This was a kidnapping. This was a billionaire-flavored fever dream. But as I looked at the crumpled bag on the counter and the numbers on my screen that didn't add up, I realized I didn't have a choice. I was drowning, and the most powerful woman in the city had just thrown me a very expensive, very terrifying rope. I grabbed my backpack. I threw in my laptop, my only 2 pairs of jeans that didn't have holes, and a sweater that I'd knitted myself. I looked around the room one last time. It felt smaller than it had 10 minutes ago. I walked down the stairs, past the smell of burnt sugar, and stepped out into the cold night air. The black SUV was idling. The door opened as I approached. Juliana was sitting in the back, her face illuminated by the glow of a tablet. She didn't look up. Get in, she said. I got in. The leather was soft, the air was perfectly climate-controlled, and as the car pulled away from the curb, I realized that my life had just collided with something massive, something marble, something that was never going to let me go. The drive was silent, the kind of silence that feels like it has a physical weight. I sat as far away from Juliana as the spacious back seat allowed, clutching my backpack to my chest like a shield. I watched the city lights blur past the tinted windows. We were heading toward the hills, toward the part of the city where the trees were manicured and the gates were made of wrought iron. Juliana didn't say a word. She tapped at her tablet, her face a mask of professional detachment. She looked like she was calculating the trajectory of a satellite, not kidnapping a freelance indexer. We pulled into a driveway that seemed to go on for miles. The house, if you could call a structure made entirely of glass and white stone a house, was perched on the edge of a cliff. It looked like a diamond dropped into the forest. The doors opened automatically. Juliana stepped out, and I followed, feeling like a stray cat brought into a palace. Inside, the floors were white marble, so polished I could see my own terrified reflection. The air smelled like cedar and silence. "This is your room," Juliana said, stopping in front of a door that was larger than my entire kitchen. "There is a bathroom through that door. The closet is stocked with basics. My physician will arrive at 7:30. Do not be late for breakfast. Why are you doing this? I asked again, my voice echoing in the vast hallway. Juliana paused, her hand on the handle of her own door across the hall. Because I hate waste, Ilara, and watching a mind like yours waste away in a studio apartment because of a clerical error in your DNA is a waste I don't care to permit. She went inside her room and closed the door. I stood in the hallway for a long time, listening to the quiet. I went into my room. The bed was larger than my entire studio. The sheets were silk. I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering when the catch was going to arrive, because there was always a catch. The next morning was a blur of needles and soft-spoken doctors. Juliana's private physician was a woman named Dr. Aris, who treated me with a level of care I hadn't experienced in my entire life. She didn't look at my lack of insurance. She didn't look at my mismatched socks. She just looked at me. By noon, I had a treatment plan, a prescription that cost more than a car, and a sense of relief so profound, I felt like I might actually float away. I found Juliana in the dining room. She was sitting at a long table, drinking coffee, and looking at a holographic display. She looked up as I entered. "Sit," she said. I sat. The breakfast in front of me was a work of art. Fresh fruit, poached eggs, bread that actually tasted like bread. I ate in silence while Juliana worked. When I was finished, I cleared my throat. "Thank you," I said. "For the doctor. For everything. I'll find a way to pay you back. I can index your company's manuals. I can—" Juliana held up a hand. "You will not be indexing manuals, Ilara. You will be recovering. And you will be staying here until I am satisfied that you aren't going to collapse in a bakery." "But I can't just live here," I said, my voice rising. "I have a life. I have responsibilities." "You have a card table and $23, Juliana said, her voice dropping to that dangerous low register. "You have a body that is fighting itself. You are staying here because I have decided it." I felt a spark of anger. "You can't just decide things for me. I'm a person, not a company you're acquiring." Juliana stood up. She walked around the table until she was standing directly in front of me. She leaned down, her face inches from mine. Her blue eyes were like ice. "I have spent my entire life acquiring things, Ilara, and I have never once been wrong about what is worth keeping. You are staying. If you try to leave, my security will simply bring you back. It's for your own good." I hated her in that moment. I hated how right she was, and I hated how her presence made my heart do a weird, fluttering thing that had nothing to do with my autoimmune disorder. I stayed. For the next 2 weeks, I was a ghost in Juliana's empire. I wandered the glass hallways, I read books in the massive library, and I tried to ignore the fact that my life was objectively better in every way. But it felt like a trap, a golden, beautiful trap. Juliana was rarely home during the day, but at night, we had dinner. The conversations were sharp, intellectual, and increasingly personal. She didn't talk about her business. She talked about the stars, about architecture, about the way the world was failing to protect the people who needed it most. She was a woman of immense power, but beneath the marble, there was something else. Something quiet, something lonely. One night, I was wandering the kitchen at 2 a.m. I couldn't sleep. The silence of the house was too loud. I found Juliana sitting at the island, a single light on above her. She was wearing a silk robe, her hair down, looking more human than I'd ever seen her. She was staring at a glass of water. "Can't sleep?" I asked, stepping into the light. Juliana didn't look up. The silence is too much sometimes, she said. I nodded. I get it. Back at my place, there was always the radiator or the car alarms. Here, it's just nothing. Juliana looked at me then. Her expression was unreadable. Why did you really send that memo to me, Alara? Was it really a mistake? I felt my face go hot. Yes, I swear. I was trying to send it to my sister. Why would I send that to you? You're the scariest person in the city. Juliana smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen from her. It wasn't dangerous. It was just a smile. I'm the scariest person in the city, and you blocked me, she said. I've had people threaten my life, and they weren't as brave as you were when you hit that block button. I laughed. I wasn't brave. I was panicking. Juliana stood up. She walked over to me, stopping just a few inches away. The air between us felt charged, like a storm was about to break. You're the only person in this house who doesn't want something from me, Alara. Everyone else, my board, my staff, my family, they all see me as a resource. You see me as a problem. It's refreshing. I'm not a problem, I whispered. You're just a lot. Juliana reached out, her hand hovering near my face. She didn't touch me, but I could feel the heat from her skin. You're a lot too, Alara. She turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there in the dark. My heart was pounding. I realized then that the trap wasn't the house. It wasn't the money. The trap was her. And I was already caught. The next morning, I woke up to a different kind of silence. The house felt heavy. I went down to breakfast, but Juliana wasn't there. Instead, there was a note on the table in her sharp, elegant handwriting. I have meetings in the city. Stay inside. There is a storm coming. I looked out the glass walls. The sky was a bruised purple, the clouds hanging low over the trees. A storm. I spent the day in the library, trying to focus on a book about ancient history, but my mind kept drifting back to the kitchen, to the way Juliana had looked at me in the dark. She was a billionaire, a titan of industry, and I was a girl who indexed HVAC manuals. There was no world where this worked. There was no world where this was anything other than a temporary distraction for her. By 5 o'clock, the wind was howling through the trees, and the rain was lashing against the glass. The power flickered once, then twice, then went out entirely. The house was plunged into darkness. I felt a surge of panic. I'd always hated the dark, ever since I was a kid. It felt like the walls were closing in. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen and made my way toward the living room, where the large windows looked out over the cliff. The storm was massive. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the forest in sharp, white flashes. I saw a pair of headlights coming up the driveway. A car. Juliana. I ran to the front door, pulling it open just as she reached the porch. She was drenched, her coat heavy with rain, her hair plastered to her face. She looked exhausted. Alara, she said, stepping inside. The power is out. I know, I said. Are you okay? She didn't answer. She just stood there, dripping on the marble floor. She looked fragile. For the first time, she didn't look like a titan. She looked like a woman who had been fighting all day and finally lost. I walked over to her and took her coat. It was freezing. Come on, I said. You need to get dry. I led her to the living room, where there was a large fireplace. I'd never used it before, but I knew how. I spent 10 minutes coaxing a flame into life while Juliana sat on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket I'd found in the closet. The light from the fire cast long, flickering shadows across the room. I sat on the floor near her, watching the flames. You should have stayed in the city, I said softly. The roads are dangerous. I wanted to come home, Juliana said. Her voice was barely a whisper. I looked up at her. Home? Juliana leaned back, closing her eyes. I've had this house for 10 years, Alara. It's never felt like a home. It's just a place where I keep my things. But today, in the middle of a board meeting where everyone was screaming about quarterly projections, all I could think about was getting back here. To you. I felt a lump in my throat. Why? Because you're real, Juliana said, opening her eyes. She looked at me with an intensity that made my breath hitch. Everything else is a performance. Everything else is a calculation. But you're the only thing that isn't a part of the plan. I didn't know what to say. I reached out and rested my hand on her knee, over the blanket. Juliana didn't pull away. She reached down and took my hand, her fingers interlacing with mine. Her skin was warm now, heated by the fire. I'm not a good person, Alara, she said. I've done things to get where I am. I've stepped on people. I've been cold. I've been cruel. I'm not who you think I am. I think you're a woman who had to build a marble empire to keep the world from breaking her, I said. Juliana's grip on my hand tightened. She leaned down, her face close to mine. The firelight danced in her blue eyes. And then, she kissed me. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, hungry, and full of all the things she hadn't been able to say. It tasted like rain and smoke and years of loneliness. I kissed her back, my hands finding their way into her damp hair. The storm was raging outside, but inside, by the fire, the world had narrowed down to just the two of us. We stayed like that for a long time, tangled together on the floor, the only sound the crackle of the wood and the wind against the glass. When we finally pulled apart, Juliana rested her forehead against mine. You should go, she whispered. You should leave this house and never look back. I'm not going anywhere, I said. Juliana smiled, a sad, beautiful smile. I know, that's what I'm afraid of. The next few weeks were a strange, beautiful blur. We lived in a bubble, a world of silk sheets and quiet mornings. Juliana still went to the city, but she was always back by 6. We had dinner, we talked, we existed in a space where the rest of the world couldn't reach us. But the world always finds a way in. It started with a phone call. I was in the library when I heard Juliana's voice from the hallway. She was shouting. I'd never heard her shout before. I don't care about the optics, she yelled. She is staying where she is. If you have a problem with it, you can take it up with the board. I stepped into the hallway. Juliana was standing by the window, her phone gripped in her hand so tight her knuckles were white. What's going on? I asked. Juliana turned, her face a mask of fury. It's nothing, she said. It's not nothing, I said, walking over to her. Tell me. She sighed, rubbing her temples. My ex-business partner, Marcus. He's been looking for a way to push me out of the company for years. He found out about you. He's calling you a liability, a distraction. He's threatening to go to the press with a story about how I'm keeping a vulnerable woman in my house against her will. I felt a cold chill run through me. He's going to make it look like you've kidnapped me. Juliana nodded. He's going to use your medical history, your financial situation, everything. He's going to make me look like a predator. I looked at her. Are you? No, Juliana said, her voice firm. But the world won't see it that way. They'll see a billionaire and a girl with nothing. They'll see power and exploitation. I stood there, looking at the woman I'd fallen in love with. The woman who had saved my life and then built a cage of gold around me. Maybe I should leave, I whispered. If I leave, the story goes away. Juliana stepped toward me, her eyes blazing. No, you are not leaving. I won't let him win. I won't let him take the only thing that's ever been real. But what about the company? What about your empire? Juliana laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. I built that empire with my own 2 hands, Alara. If I have to burn it down to keep you, then I'll strike the match myself. The crisis arrived 3 days later. It was a gala for the city's elite, an event Juliana had attended every year for a decade. Marcus was there, and he'd invited the press. I was in the bedroom, staring at a dress Juliana had bought for me. It was midnight blue, silk, and cost more than my old apartment. I didn't want to go. I wanted to hide. But Juliana had insisted. We are going to show them, she had said. We are going to show them that we aren't afraid. I put on the dress. I did my hair. I looked like someone I didn't recognize. I looked like a queen. When I walked down the stairs, Juliana was waiting. She was wearing a black tuxedo, her hair slicked back, looking every bit the titan of industry. She looked at me, and for a moment, the fury in her eyes vanished, replaced by something so tender it made my heart ache. You look beautiful, she said. I feel like an imposter, I whispered. Juliana took my hand. You are the only person in that room who isn't an imposter, Alara. Remember that. The gala was a nightmare of flashing lights and whispered conversations. I could feel the eyes on us, the judgment, the curiosity. Marcus was there, standing in the center of the room with a group of reporters. He was a tall, oily man with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Juliana, he called out as we approached. So glad you could make it. And this must be the young lady we've all been hearing so much about. He looked at me with a smirk. Ilara, isn't it? I hear you've been having quite a time at the Vane estate. I felt Juliana's grip on my hand tighten. Marcus, she said, her voice like ice. I suggest you choose your next words very carefully. Marcus laughed. Oh, Juliana, don't be so dramatic. We're all just concerned. It's quite a change for you, isn't it? Bringing a stranger into your home, especially one in such a delicate position. The reporters leaned in, their recorders catching every word. Juliana stepped forward, pulling me with her. She didn't look at Marcus. She looked at the reporters. I know what you've been told, she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. I know the story Marcus has been trying to sell. That I'm a predator. That I've taken advantage of a woman in need. She paused, her eyes sweeping the room. But the truth is much simpler. I met Ilara by accident, a stupid, mundane accident. And in her, I found something I didn't think existed. I found a person who saw me, not for my money or my power, but for who I actually am. She looked at me then, and the world seemed to fall away. Ilara is not a liability. She is not a distraction. She is the woman I love. And if that makes me a liability to my company, then I will gladly resign tonight. A collective gasp went up from the crowd. Marcus's smirk vanished. He looked stunned. Juliana, you can't be serious, he stammered. I am entirely serious, Juliana said. She turned back to the reporters. My board can have my resignation by morning, but they will never have her. She turned and walked out of the room, pulling me with her. We didn't look back. We didn't wait for the questions. We walked out into the cool night air, past the flashing lights and the noise, and got into the waiting car. The drive back to the house was silent, but it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of a bridge being burned. When we got back to the glass house, Juliana didn't go inside. She walked to the edge of the cliff, looking out over the city. You really did it, I said, walking up behind her. You really gave it all up. Juliana didn't turn around. I didn't give anything up, Ilara. I just finally decided what was worth keeping. I reached out and took her hand. What happens now? Juliana turned to me, her blue eyes soft in the moonlight. Now, we live. I have enough money to last 10 lifetimes. I don't need the board. I don't need the empire. I just need you. I pulled her into my arms, holding her tight. The billionaire and the indexer. The marble and the bread. It was a collision that shouldn't have worked, but as I stood there on the edge of the cliff, holding the woman who had burned down her world for me, I realized that the accident wasn't a mistake at all. It was the only thing that had ever gone right. 2 years later. I sat on the balcony of our new house, a smaller, warmer place by the ocean. It was still beautiful, but it was made of wood and stone, not glass and marble. The air smelled of salt and jasmine. I was working on a book, my own book, not an index of someone else's. My health was stable, the medication was working, and the fatigue was a distant memory. I heard the sound of a car in the driveway. Juliana. She wasn't a CEO anymore. She was a consultant, a mentor, and a woman who spent her weekends gardening and her evenings reading to me. She walked onto the balcony, her hair a little longer now, her face relaxed. She was carrying a tray with 2 cups of coffee. "Hey," she said, leaning down to kiss my forehead. "How's the writing going?" "It's going well," I said, taking a cup. "I was just thinking about something." "What?" I looked at her, the woman who had changed everything. "Do you ever think about that voice memo? The one I sent to the wrong number?" Juliana smiled, a real, warm smile. "Every day," she said. "I think about how I almost deleted it. I think about how close I came to just ignoring it." I laughed. "And I think about how I blocked you." Juliana sat down beside me, pulling me into her side. "It was the best mistake we ever made, Ilara." I looked out at the ocean, the sun setting over the water in a blaze of orange and pink. The world was big, and sometimes it was cruel, and sometimes it was just plain messy. But sometimes, if you were very, very lucky, you typed one wrong digit and found exactly where you were supposed to be. The math finally added up. One wrong number. One secret confession. One powerful woman who refused to let go. It was the perfect collision. And as Juliana pulled me closer, I knew I was finally, truly home. I remember the way the light used to hit my old apartment. It was a filtered, dusty kind of light, the kind that made everything look tired. Now, the light is different. It's clear. It's bright. It's the kind of light that shows you every detail, every imperfection, and tells you it's okay. Juliana still drinks her coffee black, and she still smells like cedar, but there's a softness to her now that wasn't there before. She's not the Ice Queen anymore. She's just Juliana, and I'm just Ilara. We aren't a headline or a scandal or a distraction. We're just 2 women who found each other in the middle of a storm. I looked at my phone, sitting on the table. It was a new phone, a better one, but the number was the same. I never changed it. I never wanted to. Because every time I look at it, I'm reminded of the moment the world shifted. "Sophie called me yesterday," I said, leaning my head on Juliana's shoulder. "She wanted to know if I'm still happy." "And what did you tell her?" Juliana asked, her voice a low hum. "I told her that I'm more than happy," I said. "I told her that I'm finally living the life I was supposed to have, even if I had to send a very embarrassing voice memo to a billionaire to get it." Juliana laughed, and the sound was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. "I'd listen to that memo 1,000 times if it meant I got to keep you," she said. I closed my eyes, breathing in the scent of the ocean and the woman beside me. The radiator wasn't clanking. The rent was paid. The math was perfect. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was just here, in the light, with her. The silence of the evening was filled with the sound of the waves, a rhythmic, soothing pulse that felt like the heartbeat of the world. We sat there until the stars came out, the same stars Juliana had talked about on our first nights together. They seemed closer now, less like distant points of light and more like old friends. "You know," Juliana whispered as we watched a shooting star streak across the sky. "I used to look at the stars and feel so small. I used to think that the universe was just a vast, empty machine." I looked at her. "And now?" "Now," she said, turning to me with a look of pure, unadulterated love. "Now I look at the stars and I feel like the luckiest woman in the universe. Because out of all the billions of people on this planet, and out of all the millions of phone numbers in this city, you found mine." I reached up and traced the line of her jaw, feeling the warmth of her skin. "It wasn't a mistake, Juliana," I said. "It was an accident, but it wasn't a mistake." She smiled, and the light in her eyes was brighter than any star. "No," she said. "It was the only thing that was ever meant to happen." We stayed on the balcony for a long time, watching the world turn, two women who had found their way home through a single, stupid, life-altering accident. And as the night deepened, I realized that the best things in life aren't the things you plan for. They're the things that happen when you're busy falling apart. They're the wrong numbers that lead to the right people. They're the collisions that break you open so the light can finally get in. And as Juliana led me inside, closing the door on the night, I knew that I would never be lost again. I was found. I was loved. I was hers. The end of the story was really just the beginning. Every morning we wake up and we choose each other again. Every morning we drink our coffee and we watch the light change. And every morning I'm reminded that the world is full of accidents, but none of them are as beautiful as the one that brought me to her. I think about the girl in the studio apartment sometimes. The girl with the card table and the $23. I want to tell her that it's going to be okay. I want to tell her that the storm is coming, but so is the sun. I want to tell her that she's braver than she thinks, but I don't have to, because she's me, and I'm here, and I'm happy. The radiator is gone, but the warmth is still here. The oatmeal is gone, but the sweetness is still here. The fear is gone, but the love is still here. And that's all that matters. In the end, it wasn't about the money, or the power, or the empire. It was about the connection. The accidental, beautiful, terrifying connection that saved us both. And as I lay in bed beside Juliana, listening to her breathe, I knew that I would never take a single moment for granted, because I know how close I came to missing it. I know how close I came to never sending that text. But I did. And because I did, I have everything. I have her, and she has me. And that is the best math of all. The stars are still there, and the ocean is still there, and the world is still turning. But for us, the world is different. The world is ours, and we're never going to let it go. We're going to keep living our accidental life, one beautiful day at a time. And we're going to keep loving each other, one beautiful moment at a time. Because that's what you do when you find your person. You hold on. You don't let go. And you thank your lucky stars for the wrong number that changed everything. My life used to be a series of what-ifs and if-onlys. Now it's a series of thank gods and I loves, and I wouldn't change a single thing. Not the broken toaster, not the dying walrus radiator, and certainly not the voice memo that started it all. Because it all led to this. It all led to her, and she is everything. The sun will come up tomorrow, and we'll be here to see it. Together. Just like we were always meant to be. The accident is over. The life has begun. And it's the most beautiful life I could have ever imagined. Thank you, Juliana, I whispered into the dark. Thank you for answering the phone. And in the quiet of our home, she whispered back. Thank you for calling, Ilara. Thank you for calling. And then there was only the sound of the ocean and the stars and the two of us, finally, perfectly, at peace. I think about the way her office used to look. All that glass and steel, it was so cold. Now she has an office with a big wooden desk and a window that looks out at the garden. She has a rug that's a little bit frayed at the edges because the dog we adopted likes to chew on it. She has a stack of books that she's actually reading, not just displaying. She looks so much more alive. And I think that's the real secret. Power doesn't make you alive. Love does. Being seen does. Being known does. And Juliana Vane, the woman who once controlled the clouds, is finally down here on Earth with me. And she's never looked better. We went back to the old neighborhood once. We walked past the bakery and the studio apartment. The bakery was still there, smelling of burnt sugar. The apartment had a new tenant, someone with a different set of problems and a different set of dreams. I looked up at the window and I didn't feel sad. I just felt a sense of closure. That girl is gone. She's been replaced by someone stronger, someone happier, someone who knows her worth. Juliana took my hand as we walked away. You okay? She asked. I'm better than okay, I said. I'm home. She squeezed my hand and we kept walking, two women in love, moving toward a future that was no longer an accident, a future that was ours. And as the city blurred behind us, I knew that no matter where we went, as long as we were together, we would always be exactly where we were supposed to be. The math was finally, perfectly, beautifully right. 1 + 1 = us. And that's the only number I ever need to know. The end of the beginning of the forever, and the most beautiful wrong number in the history of the world. I remember the first time I saw her in the light after the storm. She looked so human. That was the moment I knew. That was the moment the Ice Queen melted, and I've been keeping her warm ever since. It's a full-time job, but the benefits are incredible. She still tries to manage me sometimes, but now I just laugh and tell her that I'm not a subsidiary. She usually responds by kissing me until I forget what we were arguing about. It's a very effective management technique. I highly recommend it. But in all seriousness, I've learned that love isn't about control. It's about surrender. It's about letting someone else see the parts of you that you've been hiding and trusting them not to break you. Juliana trusted me with her loneliness, and I trusted her with my fear. And together, we built something stronger than any marble empire. We built a life. A real, messy, beautiful life. And I wouldn't trade it for all the cloud computing in the world. The stars are coming out again. I think I'll go find Juliana. She's probably in the garden, talking to the roses. She says they grow better if you tell them they're beautiful. I think she's right. It worked for me. I walked out into the cool night air, the scent of jasmine filling my lungs. I saw her standing by the rose bushes, her hair silver in the moonlight. She looked up and smiled. There you are, she said. I was just telling the flowers about you. I walked over and wrapped my arms around her. And what did you say? I said that you're the most beautiful thing in the world, she whispered. and that I'm the luckiest woman alive. I kissed her, a slow, sweet kiss that tasted of home. I know the feeling, I said. I know the feeling. And as we stood there in our garden, under our stars, I knew that the accident was finally complete. We were exactly where we were meant to be, and we were never going to let go. The end, or rather, the beginning, forever. I looked at the moon, and I thought about the first time I'd seen it from her penthouse. It had seemed so far away then. Now, it feels like it's right here, part of our world. Everything feels closer now. Everything feels more real. And I think that's the greatest gift she ever gave me. She made the world real again. She made me real again. And I'll spend the rest of my life making sure she knows it. I love you, Juliana. Always. And she looked at me, her eyes full of the light of 1,000 stars, and said, I love you, Ilara. Forever. And for once, the billionaire had the last word. And it was the only word that mattered. The math was done. The story was told. And the love was just beginning. One wrong number. One right life. One perfect collision. The end. I think about the way she looks when she's sleeping. So peaceful. So still. It's hard to believe she's the same woman who once commanded an empire. But then she wakes up and looks at me with those blue eyes, and I see the fire is still there. It's just burning for me now. And I'll keep that fire alive as long as I'm breathing. Because she's my heart, and I'm hers, and that's the only truth I need. The stars are fading now. The sun is coming up. Another day. Another chance to love her. Another chance to be loved. And I'm going to take every single one of them. Because I know how precious they are. I know how lucky I am. And I'm never going to let it go. Not for anything. Not for anyone. Just us. Always us. The accidental connection that became the permanent one. The wrong number that led to the right home. The ice queen and the indexer. The marble and the bread. The perfect, beautiful, terrifying collision. And the love that survived it all. Thank you, universe. Thank you for the wrong number. Thank you for Juliana. And thank you for me. The math is perfect. The story is complete. And the love is forever. The end. Really, truly, the end. Except for the part where we live happily ever after. But that's a different story. One that we're writing every single day. And I can't wait to see how it turns out. I think it's going to be a bestseller. At least in our house. And that's the only audience that matters. I love you, Juliana. I love you, Ilara. The end. The beautiful, accidental end. And the even more beautiful, intentional beginning. Forever and always. The stars have gone, and the sun is high. The world is awake, and so are we. Ready for another day. Ready for another moment. Ready for everything. Together. Always together. The math is right, the life is good, and the love is everything. The end. Truly. Finally. The end. Of the beginning. Of the forever. Of us. The accidental connection. The fate collision. The perfect mistake. The wrong number. The right woman. The ice queen. The mess. The marble. The bread. The love. The end.